chapter concerning the method of the Prophet ﷺ in eating. So the chapter after this is the actual food that the Prophet ﷺ used to eat, the type of food that he would consume. This chapter is more about the way he would consume that food, right? So there are certain things that the Prophet ﷺ, some things we talked about last week. So the Prophet ﷺ, he never ate leaning on anything, right? So many scholars in our modern times, they include the chair on this, right? Because when you're sitting on a chair, naturally you are leaning on something, therefore they deem it undesirable and makruh to eat on a chair. Again, it is not haram to eat on a chair. However, they say this is undesirable because the Prophet ﷺ said that he does not eat leaning, and naturally when you're on a chair you are leaning, therefore they would deem it undesirable to eat while sitting on a chair. And generally speaking, the way the Prophet ﷺ would sit when he was eating, he would sit first of all always on the floor. The food was also on the floor, so on a spread but on the floor. So there's a hadith that's coming. So that's how the Prophet ﷺ would eat. And the way he would actually sit is either the way that we sit in tashahhud, right, with knees and feet both with contact onto the floor, or he would sit in a squat-like position. So knees are, of course, raised, knees and shins, and the feet are the only contact onto the floor. So that's how the Prophet ﷺ would eat both of these. He would not eat cross-legged. So many scholars would also call this a type of leaning, so cross-legged. Again, all of these ways of sitting are not haram, right? But we're talking about how the Prophet ﷺ ate. Right, so he would eat in that squat-like position, or sitting in the position like we sit in tashahhud in salah, and some additional things are mentioned over here. Ali ibn Ka'b ibn Malik عن أبيه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يلعق أصابعه ثلاثة وفي رواية يلعق أصابعه الثلاث. Ka'b ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would lick his fingers 3 times, and in some narrations it's mentioned would lick all 3 of his fingers, right? So a very slight difference in the wording of the hadith. Either it's he would lick all 3 of his fingers, meaning he would generally eat with 3 fingers. So that would be the thumb, the index, and the middle finger. Or he would lick his fingers thrice. So this is after he's finished eating his food. So first thing, that means that he's eating with his hands, right? He's eating with just his right hand. And most of the time, because of the type of the food that was eaten by the Prophet ﷺ, 3 fingers would suffice, right? Because what was generally eaten by the Prophet ﷺ was bread and some sort of curry or condiment that was going along with that, right? Bread. So that's what was eaten by the Prophet ﷺ. This is something you can eat with 3 fingers, but again, this doesn't mean that you have to go out of your way. So for example, a lot of us, that rice is a staple in our cuisine, right? So you're going to have a very hard time to eat rice with just 3 fingers. So it's not necessary that you eat with 3 fingers, right? However, if the food allows this, then you can eat with 3 fingers, right? But this is, and licking the fingers. So basically the Prophet ﷺ, after he was finished eating, he would it's mentioned that either he's licking his fingers clean 3 times, or he's licking all 3 of his fingers clean. This is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the idea behind this is the Prophet ﷺ is narrated to have said, فَإِنَّكُمْ لَا تَدْرُونَ فِي أَيِّ طَعَامِكُمُ الْبَرَكَةِ. That the reason he is licking his fingers clean is because there is remnants of food on his fingers, and the Prophet ﷺ is narrated to have said that one of you is not aware of which part of his food contains blessing, right? So it's entirely possible that there's some food remaining on your fingers and you just go and wash them, and that was the part that contains barakah. What is barakah? Barakah is divine goodness and blessing in something. So the barakah in the portion of your food, that entire plate that you eat, more than that might be on the little bit that you just wash off your finger and goes down the drain, right? And more important than this, that we talked about the concept of treating food as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a gift is something that you utilize to its maximum, right? So imagine that somebody again gives you a gift, right? And the person is standing there and watching, like let's say he gave you, I don't know, a cup of coffee, right? And you take 2 sips of the coffee and then you throw the rest into the garbage right in front of the guy that just gave you that cup of coffee, right? How do you think that that person is going to, well, we shouldn't say it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't ascribe feeling to him, but that's not the way that you conduct yourself in the presence of somebody who is giving you a gift, right? So therefore, if food is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we utilize it to its maximum and we treat it as a bounty and blessing as it deserves to be treated. سمعت أنس بن مالك رضي الله تعالى عنه يقول أتي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بتمر فرأيته يأكل وهو مقع من الجوع. Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala who says that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, some dates were brought before him, and I saw him eating while leaning forward because of the hunger that he was, the state of hunger that he was in at that time. So muqa'im min al-ju' basically means that a person is so hungry that they can't remain upright and straight, and this was quite often, this was the state in which the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they found themselves in, and there are other ahadith that are coming. And basically, one thing that the commentators of the hadith, they mention over here is that part of what is being taught to us, that the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, in particular the Prophet ﷺ himself, for many days and months sometimes, he would remain hungry, right? And if the world was something that, worldly possessions and just, material things were of value to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the first people that would be given these things were the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his companions, right? Therefore, we understand that the value of material possessions in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not much, right? So, the value in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for things that are not material, for relationships with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, things that are spiritual in nature. These are the things that we must place value on, and food and the things that you can, as I mentioned last week as well, that as far as food is concerned, now of course there's nothing wrong with enjoying food, right? This is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this. However, as far as food goes, you can get by eating simpler things, and you can get by while eating more extravagant things. The point is the same, right? The point is that you are using this food to nourish yourself, and if you are going to eat the simplest of things yet disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then eating that simple thing is not going to be of any benefit to you. And if you're going to eat the best of meals every day, but you're going to pray your salah on time, then inshallah you have accomplished the purpose behind that food, right? So it's not, it's not exactly something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes for you, that you remain hungry, or you remain in a state that you don't eat good food, or you shun good food. That's not what's being taught over here, right? But rather what's being taught is that you understand where the emphasis lies, right? You eat to sustain yourself and to give strength to your physical person and your physical body in order to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by means of acts of worship. باب ما جاء في صفة خبز رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Now comes the chapter regarding the actual food items that were eaten in the house of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. This chapter is very short. The chapter after this is very long. We're probably not going to be able to finish it just this week. The chapter concerning the khubz, the bread of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Right. Generally speaking, the Prophet ﷺ and his household were accustomed to consuming barley, right? Nowadays, barley is something of something unique for most of us. A lot of us have probably never eaten it before. So barley is a type of flour. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so now it's considered a novelty, right? So most of the more widely available to us is wheat, right? Wheat is what's more widely available to us. And barley is something that you can't just find lying around. You'll have to actually go and look for it if you want barley, right? However, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, barley was more widely available, right? And it was considered something that was more reasonably priced. It was considered cheaper than actual wheat. Wheat was available in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So this was generally what the Prophet ﷺ he ate. And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha أنها قالت ما شبع آل محمد من خبز الشعير يومين متتابعين حتى قبض رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that the family of the Prophet of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam never ate bread made of barley for 2 consecutive days until the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam left this world. So basically what Aisha radiallahu ta'ala is saying, that there were never 2 days in a row that bread, or I'm saying bread, but I don't want you to think like the loaf of bread, right? Khubz is in Urdu you would call it roti, right? This is what we're khubz in Arabic. It's khubz, you know what khubz is, right? So it's not bread like the loaf of Wonder bread that you buy from the store, right? Not that bread. So something closer to that. And the reason I'm not using roti to translate this over here is because when you think roti, you think something thin and very even in nature, and that's not exactly what was eaten in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because the flour that we eat, right, even the wheat flour that we eat, or the whole wheat flour that we eat, is very uniform in texture. It's very refined. That's not what was eaten in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. In fact, the wheat that we actually grow nowadays, right? The dwarf wheat, the variety of wheat that's grown here in North America and in most parts of the world. This variety of wheat didn't actually exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. This is something that's relatively more modern, right? So maybe 150, 200 years maximum. This is how long this variety of wheat has been around. Wheat has always been around, but it was a different variety of wheat, right? So this is, generally speaking, the Prophet ﷺ would eat this, and even that, it wasn't something that was made, every single day, morning and evening. Never 2 days in a row did the Prophet ﷺ eat this, and eat this meaning that it wasn't available to him. That right, there wasn't enough to go around. That this bread would be made in the house of the Prophet ﷺ for 2 days consecutively. حدثنا أبو حازم عن سهل بن سعد أنه قيل له أكل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم النقي يعني الحوار، فقال سهل ما رأى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم النقي حتى لقي الله، فقيل له هل كانت لكم مناخل على عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم؟ قال ما كانت لنا مناخل. قيل كيف كنتم تصنعون بالشعير؟ قال كنا ننفخه فيطير منه ما طار ثم نعجنه. Sahl ibn Sa'd was asked that did the Prophet ﷺ eat refined flour? So refined flour is that white flour that you get in the supermarket. That is what is being asked over here. But not even that. So even that is relatively more of a modern invention. That basically anything beneficial from that flour is removed, and you get just something that is going to be put in your stomach. So that's what the white flour is, right? So was refined. Did the Prophet ﷺ eat refined flour? And Sahl ibn Sa'd said no. The Prophet ﷺ never saw it. Forget about eating it. It was just not available. This was something that was not available in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And then he was asked another question: that did you have sieves? Did you have sieves in the time of the Prophet ﷺ? Everybody knows what a sieve is, right? You put flour in it and you shake it around, and the bran remains on top and the refined flour falls on the bottom. That I know you know what it is, but some people might have never seen a sieve in their lives before, right? So that's what a sieve is, right? So all of that flour that you buy from the supermarket that comes pre-packaged and refined for you, somebody once upon a time used to actually do that by hand, right? So if your parents or your grandparents or whoever it is still alive, you can ask them what that is if you have never seen it before. But that's what a sieve is, right? So Sa'd ibn Sa'd was asked that, did you have sieves in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And he said no. In the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we didn't use sieves. Then he was asked that how did you basically separate the chaff from the actual flour that's edible? And he said that we would just shake it, right? And we would blow on it, and whatever would fly away from the bran and the chaff, that would fly away, and the rest of it we would just take and we would mix it with water and oil, and we would make our bread with this, right? So this is still the way it's done in some parts of the world, right? However, that's not done, right? So our flour is just this. All of this, somebody does it, or nobody actually does it for you anymore. Some machine does it for you, and then it comes to your home. But that's how it was done in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. عن قتادة عن أنس بن مالك قال ما أكل نبي الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على خوان ولا في سكرجة ولا خبز له مرفق. قال فقلت لقتادة فعلى ما كانوا يأكلون قال على هذا السفر. Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam never ate at a raised platform, and he never ate out of bowls, and he never, thin bread was never made for him, right? So khiwan basically means that the person is sitting on the floor and the food is placed on a raised platform in front of him, right? So it's not very common in this part of the world because most people don't sit on the floor ever, but it is still common in some places in the world. Basically, the person is still sitting on the floor, but the food is placed on a platform in front of that person, a kind of like a small bench, right? And again, this is not haram to eat in this manner. This is saying the Prophet ﷺ did not eat in this manner. And the reason the Prophet ﷺ didn't eat in this manner is because this type of raised platform or bench and eating off of that, the food being placed on that and eating in that. And so I was reading through the commentaries of this hadith, and it appears that this was the way that the arrogant people in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they would eat, right? So the simple people, they would just have their food placed on a spread on the floor, and the arrogant people, this is how they would eat. And it's mentioned that one of the reasons they would eat like this is so that they wouldn't, so if your food is placed on the floor, for example, right, and you have to eat it, you have to bend over, and you have to bend your head over, right? And if your food is right here in front of you, you don't have to bend anything, you can just remain exactly where you are and eat like this, right? So this is that concept of needing this food, and that concept of showing some humility before a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absent from this type of seating arrangement. That's why the Prophet ﷺ did not eat on this type of raised platform. وَلَا فِي سُكُرُّجَةٍ. Sukurruja is basically a bowl, right? Now again, it's not haram to use a bowl. What's being referred to over here is, the Prophet ﷺ, when he would sit to eat, right? So who needs multiple bowls when they sit to eat? People who have 3 or 4 things to eat at the same time, right? Then you're going to put one thing in one vessel, and you're going to put another thing in this vessel, and you're going to put another thing in that vessel. The Prophet ﷺ never had that. Therefore, there was no need, right? So one vessel would suffice because that's it, right? That's all the food that's going to be eaten was going to be in that one place. There weren't, 3 different chutneys and, 2 different types of rice and 2 different types of curry, and that's not how the Prophet ﷺ, again, it's fine if you eat that. If Allah subhanahu, if you are a person who likes your food and you want to eat, there's no problem. What's being referred to over here is the Prophet ﷺ, his manner of eating was very simple, so therefore this equipment was not needed, right? This equipment was not needed. وَلَا خُبِزَ لَهُ مُرَقَّقٌ, and thin bread was not made for him, because to make thin bread, what do you need? You need refined flour, right? So this refined flour was not there, and therefore this type of bread was not available to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Qatada was asked, so how did he eat? He said that he would eat on this type of spread. So basically he is sitting on the floor, the food is also on the floor, just on a spread, right? So a piece of cloth or something of that nature. باب ما جاء في صفة إدام رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The chapter concerning the curry or the condiments of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when I say curry, I don't want you to think of the Indian curry, right? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never ate curry. There's simply no other way to translate idam in the English language, right? So basically, whatever you're eating with that bread or rice, all of that in general is curry. Okay, so that's what's being referred to over here. So anything that's not rice and that's not bread, right? Anything apart from that will fall under the category of the actual food, that is idam, right? And as far as that is concerned, the Prophet ﷺ, he ate a variety of things in his life. However, most of these things were simple in nature, right? So we'll read through some of these things. أن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال نعم الإدام الخل. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that what a beautiful condiment is vinegar, right? So I want you to imagine that, bread and vinegar, that is an entire meal in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So that's basically the simple nature of the food that the Prophet ﷺ would eat. So it's not that any elaborate meal was cooked for him. Bread dipped in vinegar, and the Prophet ﷺ would eat this, right? And by the way, vinegar, right? It's something that's beneficial, but not the white fake vinegar that most of us we use, right? So actual vinegar that's made of something that you can actually grow, that's the vinegar that's being referred to over here, not the highly refined water-like liquid that is sold as vinegar, right? So that is what is being referred to. The Prophet ﷺ, that white vinegar did not exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so but vinegar did exist, right? And there's an entire debate in the books of fiqh, right? So basically, one of the ways of making vinegar in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and even after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you can still get it in the supermarket today, is vinegar was made out of wine, right? So basically, after fermentation occurs, right, a product becomes intoxicating, that is wine, and after some further processing in one way or another, right, that wine could be made into vinegar. Basically, what happens there is that that intoxicating effect is removed, and that vinegar, everybody knows what vinegar is, it becomes vinegar, right? So you can drink as much vinegar as you want, you are not going to get intoxicated. You might have some other problems if you drink too much, but you're not going to have, you're not going to become intoxicated. So the challenge there now is this was once upon a time wine, right? And wine is not just, this is something that is, if it gets onto your clothing, this is something that you have to wash it away. But how about when we make wine into vinegar? What happens at that time, right? So is it permissible to consume? Is it not permissible to consume? So in the Hanafi school, we call this the process of istihala. Istihala is basically translated into the English language metamorphosis, right? However, I would caution over here that we're not talking about a complete chemical transformation, right? So a lot of people will say, Sheikh, that maybe in the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, this would be considered metamorphosis, but I could still trace the molecules back to that, whatever wine it was, and the chemical composition is basically the same. It's just one minor thing. We're not talking about a chemical composition, right? So we're talking about the end result of what's happening is clearly distinguishable in taste, in smell, and in fluidity, or two of the three things, right? Either the fluid nature remains the same, but the taste and the smell changes, then this is considered sufficient for us, right? It becomes a third new thing. So the Hanafis consider this permissible to consume, right? So as far as the Hanafis are concerned, you knock yourself up. You go ahead and you buy your wine vinegar, and that is absolutely permissible to consume, and there is nothing wrong with that. As far as the Hanafi school is concerned, they give the example of salt as well. So basically, if you've ever seen a salt mine, right, or a place that is where salt is extracted, if you come and throw anything into that pile of salt and come back a period of time later, that thing is not going to be there anymore, it's just going to be salt, right? So let's say Hanafis are masters of hypothetical situations. So in the books of Hanafi fiqh, you find the example of what if a donkey is impermissible to consume, fell into a salt mine and then disintegrated and became salt. Can you consume that salt or not? So that's according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, yes, you can consume that salt, right? Because it's no longer a donkey, it's now salt, right? So that's the example. And believe it or not, in our modern times, this whole issue, it plays an important role in the world of ingredients, right? Because half of the ingredients on most of the things that we eat, you can't even read and pronounce, right? So you have to. There are specialists in this field that study whether or not metamorphosis or istihala occurs in various ingredients. One of the most famous culprits is gelatin, right? So gelatin, whether or not istihala occurs in gelatin is a topic of debate, right? And there are various fatawa and various differences of opinion that occur, but basically it all boils down to this, right? So they are giving fatwa according to the Hanafi school, right? That if indeed this transformation takes place, then we don't care where the gelatin came from, it's permissible to consume regardless. However, that is the area of contention right there. Whether or not that complete transformation takes place is an area that people, they differ, right? And of course, this is not the domain of scholars now. The scholars are not going to study whether or not the transformation takes place over there. They're going to rely, we're talking about Islamic scholars, they're going to rely on the opinion of experts in that field, right? So they're going to consult them and they're going to ask them, and this is not a class about that particular ingredient, but you will find both opinions do exist in this regard. So there are groups of scholars, large groups of scholars, that consider all types of gelatin to be permissible to consume because they would consider this istihala to have occurred, and among them are Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami bil-Hind. So the largest body of Muslim scholars in India, right? The Islamic Fiqh Academy of India, and this is a very, very large and prestigious body of scholars. They ruled way back in 2008 or 10 that after consulting with experts in this field, that metamorphosis and istihala does indeed occur, and they rule on the permissibility of consuming gelatin. However, they did caution that this is an area of difference of opinion, and if it is at all possible for you to avoid, then it is best for you to avoid. Right? So that is their opinion. And on the flip side, you have the Fiqh Academy of Makkah al-Mukarramah, their scholars, Al-Lajnat al-Daima al-Buhuth wal-Ifta, they ruled on the opposite. They erred on the side of caution, and they say that this is an area that we would still consider gelatin to be haram. So, you take, this is a developing area, right? So just for your interest, if this does happen to, these deliberations happen to complete in our lifetime, I will be sure to let you know, inshallah. Until then, you take from the scholars that you believe that you normally consult with, right? زهد الجرمي قال كنا عند أبي موسى الأشعري فأتي بلحم دجاج فتنحى رجل من القوم فقال ما لك؟ فقال إني رأيتها تأكل شيئا فحلفت ألا آكلها. قال ادعوا فإني رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يأكل لحم دجاج. Zahdam al-Jirmi radiallahu ta'ala, he says that we were with Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu ta'ala. And Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was a senior companion of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Zahdam says that we were with him and we were in his gathering when somebody brought a meat of chicken. So somebody brought chicken into that gathering. And the Arabs in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, chicken was there. It's not that chickens didn't exist, but this wasn't something that was commonly eaten all the time. It's not nearly as common as, as we eat, right? In fact, all meat, right? So meat was eaten by the Arabs, but it wasn't something that was eaten every single day in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every now and then they would consume meat, and especially chicken, right? So chicken was something that was not nearly as common and widespread in consumption as it is now. So Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, right? So this was a novelty item, right? This was something that every now and then is prepared and people consume this. So it was presented in front of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu ta'ala. This is after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he began to eat, and he noticed that one man, he sort of moved away from the gathering, right? So Abu Musa called him and asked him that, why aren't you eating? And he said, because this chicken that you're eating right now, I saw it eating something, right? Basically eating something dirty while it was alive, so therefore I don't want to eat this, right? And so because now our chickens are mass produced, right? And they are born in a cage and they die in a cage, right? However, that's not the normal life of a chicken, right? So chickens, they roam around and they eat anything that they find on the floor, right? So many times what they're eating is filthy, right? So that's what's being referred to over here. I saw it eating something filthy. And Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu ta'ala who said that, come closer and eat, because I saw the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam eating chicken, right? So basically, you are not better than the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ate this, then you can eat this as well. Now, this is the hadith. As far as eating something, right? Eating an animal that ate filth, right? What is the ruling on that, right? So, because most of us, we never seen the animal when it was alive, right? So we will just have to trust that it didn't eat filth. However, right, back home, in whichever countries that we come from, we actually see the animal while it's alive, and then it is slaughtered, and then it is, and then we eat it, right? So that's that is a good thing, right? Especially in when you are sacrificing an animal, right, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Eid al-Adha, it is mustahab. The scholars, they write that it is preferable that you actually see that animal before it is slaughtered. You take care of that animal. It is preferable that you give it food and water before it is slaughtered, because when you take care of that animal for a period of time before you have to slaughter it, then you develop a connection with that animal, right? This is something that you took care of, you fed, you gave it water to drink, you gave it the best food that you could. On the morning of Eid al-Adha, you gave it a bath, you washed that animal, and then you sacrifice it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So this is the true sacrifice. You sacrifice something that you developed a bond and connection with, right? And you do this because this is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anyways, animals, right? So sometimes animals, they, generally speaking, they eat sometimes things that they're not supposed to eat, right? So there are sometimes goats, right? I have seen in my time in India that there are goats from specific areas that are known to be very dirty, right? They eat, absolutely filthy things, and you have to keep them in check before you want to slaughter them for a number of days to make sure they don't eat and they don't drink things that they're not supposed to be eating and drinking. So the Prophet ﷺ, there are various narrations in the Sunan of Imam Abu Dawud and the Jami' of Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah, wherein the Prophet ﷺ naha an lahmil jallalati wa labaniha. Al-jallala is that animal which is accustomed to eating filth, right? So in general, that animal is permissible to consume. However, due to some abnormality in this animal's habits, it is accustomed to eating filth, right? So this happens with lots of animals, right? So for one reason or another, it gets into the bad habit of eating dirty things that it's not supposed to be eating, right? Right? So generally it's a herbivore, but it eats things that it's not supposed to eat. So this happens with chickens, this happens with goats, this happens with any animal that you can think of, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited eating the meat of jallala. Jallala is that animal that eats filth, and also drinking the milk of that animal, right? So the scholars, they differ in their opinions as to, so first of all, what this means is that you see a chicken, right? For example, the chicken is your backyard chicken. And this chicken, you see it every day, that this chicken eats anything off the floor, right? Filthy things off the floor. So you cannot take this chicken right into your kitchen and, Bismillah, and, you slaughter it and then you eat it immediately, because this chicken is now considered jallala, right? So a lot of us know what we do with that chicken. What do you do with that chicken before you eat it? You tie it up for a couple of days, right? And you give it only good things to eat, and then you slaughter it, right? So that is the ruling, right? So a lot of us, we might have heard in our childhood 3 days, right? So generally for smaller animals, 3 days is sufficient, right? So to get to that filth out of the system, right? And that's after that you can slaughter the animal and you can consume its flesh. For larger animals, you might want to wait for a little while longer, right? But basically, that's the ruling, right? So animals that you know consume filth, right? Not of general habit, right? So permissible animals that for some reason or another they are consuming filth, then you give them good food to eat for a number of days, right? 3, 5, whatever, right? Until you are fairly certain that filth has exited the system, and then you slaughter this animal, right? And this is generally the practice anyways, at least in more traditional societies, right? So that's, they don't just pick the chicken off the street and slaughter it and give it to you for lunch. They do keep it in an enclosed space and feed it good things, make sure it's not eating trash for a number of days, and then they will give you this to eat, right? So that is the ruling. Generally speaking, that's that animal is called jallala. Now, the interesting question over here is, I'm sure this might not be such a problem in Canada, but in certain developing countries, the chickens that are mass produced over there and the things that they are given to eat are basically all filth, right? So now, what do you do in that case? Is it permissible to consume that chicken, or is it not permissible to consume that? That, Allahu A'lam, you can ask the scholars of those developing countries, inshallah. We have rules and regulations here in Canada, so we can't just feed the chickens anything. So, inshallah, we are good. But that is an area of concern in certain parts of the world. عن إبراهيم بن عمر بن السفينة عن أبيه عن جده قال أكلت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لحم حبارة. I ate with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم the meat of hubara. Hubara in English it's called the bustard. Bustard. So it's you can I'm not going to you can look it up right on your phones or wherever it is. The bustard is like it has long feet, a slightly long neck. I don't believe it's actually a bird of flight, right? So it's not found in this part of the world. It's found in the eastern part of the world. But the Prophet ﷺ did eat this bird, and this was something that was consumed by the Prophet ﷺ. عن أبي أسيد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كلوا الزيت وادهنوا به فإنه من شجرة مباركة. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said that eat and consume olive oil and apply it to your body, because this is from a blessed tree. This is the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم consumed this oil, and nowadays for the longest time, right? When I was growing up, right? So we health authorities here in Canada, they discourage the consumption of olive oil and coconut oil, all oil that was high in fat. Right? So apparently this has changed now. Now it's good that you but the Prophet ﷺ told us a long time ago that it's good, right? That you eat that you consume olive oil and you apply it to your hair and to your body. It can be used as a massage oil as well. فَإِنَّهُ مِنْ شَجَرَةٍ مُبَارَكَةٍ, because this is from a blessed tree. Referring to the ayah in the Quran, Allah نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة. Right? So the blessed tree. Right? And this is an oil that is extremely healthy for consumption. At least now even people around here agree with this fact that this oil is healthy for consumption. We always believed it was healthy for consumption because we were told by the Prophet ﷺ that this is something that you should consume. So this is something that is healthy. Basically, this was the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, one thing over here is the Prophet ﷺ. All of us in our cuisine we use copious amounts of oil, right? So that there are narrations that we find the athar of certain companions of the Prophet ﷺ that they would eat, right, and their food was dry enough that when they got up from eating, right, they could just wipe their fingers on their forearms or on their feet, and that would be sufficient to clean their fingers, right? So don't try that if you're from the subcontinent, if you're from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and I'm sure many other cuisines, but I can speak specifically for that part of the world, that our food is not like that, right? We use like half a liter of oil to cook our food, so that's, you cannot just wipe that on your forearm, and your forearm will become very dirty if you do that. So that's the Prophet ﷺ, when he's telling you to consume this is something that the Prophet ﷺ himself consumed, and it is from a blessed tree, but everything, of course, in moderation. Right? So everything, the entire system of the Prophet ﷺ was built on moderation. So that although even now, right, so that people generally agree that oils that are high in beneficial fats, so fats that contain omega-3s, for example, they are beneficial, but a lot of people even there, right, anything that's beneficial, they overdo that as well, right? So they're going to now, they're going to consume copious amounts of coconut oil, only to find out that now, their kidneys no longer have the capacity to process that. So don't do anything ridiculous like that. Eat everything in moderation. Inshallah, you should be fine.